The set of the nightly Pulse glowed under the bright studio lights. It was a sleek, modern stage where liberal commentator Brad Whitman reigned as one of America's most provocative voices. Known for his biting sarcasm and unapologetic takes, Brad was gearing up for what he thought would be another night of easy takedowns. But this time he had no idea what storm he was about to unleash. His target? Karoline Leavitt, the newly appointed White House press secretary under President Donald Trump's administration. A young, articulate, and staunch conservative, Karoline had made a name for herself as a fearless spokesperson for the administration. But it wasn't her policy stances that caught Brad's attention, it was a simple gold cross necklace that she wore during a recent press briefing. The clip played on the giant screen behind him. This administration will always uphold the values of faith, freedom, and American exceptionalism, Karoline declared confidently. The camera zoomed in, catching the subtle gleam of the cross around her neck. Brad leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Ah, there it is," he said mockingly, pausing the clip. "The obligatory religious symbol, because what's a Trump-era press secretary without a little holy propaganda hanging around their neck?" The audience chuckled. Some clapped. Encouraged, Brad continued, exaggerating a dramatic gasp. "Look at it. It's practically glowing. You can almost hear it whispering, 'Vote Republican' or 'Burn in hell.'" The laughter swelled, feeding his confidence. He wasn't done. "I mean, come on. We're in the 21st century, people. Should government officials really be parading their religious affiliations? Are we running the White House or a church?" The segment went viral within hours. Social media erupted, and while liberals laughed along, conservatives were outraged. But amid the chaos, all eyes were on one person, Karoline Leavitt. How would she respond? She didn't make them wait long. Karoline Leavitt sat in her office at the White House, watching the clip of Brad Whitman's mockery on her phone. The video had already racked up millions of views overnight. Liberals called it hilarious and on point. Conservatives called it an attack on faith and a blatant display of anti-Christian bigotry. She wasn't surprised. This wasn't the first time a mainstream media figure had taken a jab at her. But this was different. This was about her faith. Karoline wasn't just any press secretary. She had built her career on unapologetic conservatism, pushing back against the media's attacks with poise and precision. Her faith was deeply personal, but she had never hidden it. And she wasn't about to start now. She took a deep breath, straightened her navy blazer, and walked to the briefing room. The cameras flashed as she stepped up to the podium. The room was packed with reporters, each waiting for a headline-worthy moment. "Good afternoon," she began with a confident smile. "Before we take questions, I'd like to address something that has been making waves in the media." The room fell silent. "As many of you know, a certain late-night host decided to mock the gold cross necklace I wear every day." She reached up, lightly touching the pendant resting just below her collarbone. "Apparently, my personal expression of faith is considered problematic by some." She let the moment linger. The tension was palpable. In this country, we have something called the First Amendment. That means we all have the right to express our beliefs, whether it's through speech, through protest, or, yes, even through the jewelry we wear. A murmur spread through the room. Some reporters exchanged glances. Karoline continued, her voice unwavering. "I wear this cross not as a political statement, but as a reminder of my faith, of my values, and of the millions of Americans who share them." She met the cameras head-on. "To mock that is not just an attack on me. It's an attack on every person of faith in this country." The room was dead silent now. Even some of the more left-leaning reporters looked uneasy. Karoline smiled, her tone softening. "Now, with that said, let's take some questions." The room erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted over one another. "Karoline, do you believe Brad Whitman should apologize? Do you think this is an example of anti-Christian bias in the media? Are you suggesting liberals don't respect religious freedom?" Karoline raised a hand, signaling for order. "One at a time," she said smoothly. She had expected this. Meanwhile, back at the nightly Pulse studio, Brad Whitman was watching the press conference in real time. He leaned forward in his chair, suddenly aware that this was much bigger than a throwaway joke. Karoline had just turned the tables, and the fallout was only beginning. Brad Whitman sat in his sleek Manhattan office, sipping black coffee as he scrolled through social media. His notifications were exploding, but not in the way he had hoped. Instead of the usual wave of liberal support, his mentions were flooded with criticism. The hashtag I stand with Karoline was trending, and conservative influencers were calling his remarks a blatant attack on Christianity. Fox News had already aired a segment condemning him. Even some moderate voices were raising concerns. Brad's producer, Lisa, rushed into the room. Brad, we have a problem, she said, tossing a stack of printed tweets onto his desk. It's bad. Brad chuckled, trying to play it cool. It's a joke, Lisa. A joke. These people need to lighten up. Lisa crossed her arms. Well, it looks like millions of Americans don't think it was funny. You've got congressmen calling this an attack on religious freedom. Brad rolled his eyes. Oh, please. No one was calling it religious freedom when the left criticized Christian conservatives during the last administration. Lisa sighed. Look, you do what you want, but I'm telling you, this is getting ugly. The network is getting flooded with complaints. Sponsors are starting to ask questions. Brad set down his coffee. Now that got his attention. Sponsors? Yeah, Lisa said. A few major ones. They don't want to be associated with what they're calling religious intolerance. And there's more, she hesitated. Karoline just responded on Twitter. Brad grabbed his phone. His jaw clenched as he read her post. To mock someone's faith is easy. To stand by your own beliefs even when mocked takes strength. I wear my cross proudly, not to offend, but to remind myself of the values that built this nation. Faith. Freedom. Courage. I won't apologize for any of them. The tweet had over 100,000 likes in less than an hour. Brad swore under his breath. Lisa smirked. You really woke up the wrong crowd, huh? For the first time, Brad felt a twinge of doubt. He had built his career on going after conservatives, but this was different. He had underestimated Karoline's ability to turn the narrative against him. And the worst part? It was far from over. The backlash against Brad Whitman wasn't just brewing, it was a full-blown inferno. Every major conservative news outlet was running segments about the attack on Karoline Leavitt's faith. Even mainstream media outlets that typically leaned left were taking a more cautious stance, aware of how sensitive religious issues could be with the American public. But the real battle was unfolding online. Prominent conservative voices rallied behind Karoline. Fox News host Tucker Daniels called Brad's remarks a disgusting display of liberal hypocrisy. Senator Josh McAllister tweeted, the media wouldn't dare mock a Muslim or Jewish official for wearing a religious symbol. Why is Christianity fair game? Within hours, pressure began mounting on Brad's network. The executives at GBC, the parent company of the Nightly Pulse, were holding emergency meetings. Calls from advertisers were becoming increasingly urgent. Some were threatening to pull their sponsorships if the situation wasn't addressed. Karoline, on the other hand, was handling the situation masterfully. She had already turned the controversy into a rallying cry, not just for herself, but for millions of Americans who felt their faith was under attack. By the next morning, she was scheduled for an exclusive interview on America's Voice Tonight, one of the highest-rated conservative programs in the country. As the cameras went live, the host, Sean McGregor, wasted no time getting to the heart of the issue. Karoline, you've been in politics long enough to deal with criticism. But this time, it was personal. How do you respond to those who say your faith shouldn't be part of your role as press secretary? Karoline smiled, composed as ever. Sean, I'm a public servant, but I'm also a person. And like millions of Americans, my faith is an integral part of who I am. I don't wear this cross to make a statement, it's a reflection of my values, my upbringing, and my belief in something greater than myself. Sean nodded. But do you think Brad Whitman crossed a line? Karoline's smile didn't waver. I think Brad and many in the media have a habit of picking and choosing when faith is acceptable. If a liberal public figure wore a religious symbol, they'd call it a beautiful display of diversity. But when a conservative does it, suddenly it's problematic. That's the double standard we see time and time again. The audience clapped. Online, her words were already making waves. Meanwhile, back at the Nightly Pulse, Brad was facing his own reality. His producer Lisa stormed into his office, phone in hand. Brad, the network is demanding you address this. They're considering a public statement. Brad scoffed. A public statement? For what? Defending secularism? Lisa's eyes narrowed. No, for alienating half the country and dragging this network into a PR nightmare. Brad leaned back, rubbing his temples. He had spent his career making fun of conservatives, but he had never seen this kind of backlash before. Karoline had played the situation perfectly. He was quickly becoming the villain in a story where she was the hero. And now he had to decide double down or backtrack. Brad Whitman sat at his desk, staring at the camera. The red, live light blinked in front of him. His producers had insisted no, demanded that he address the controversy head-on. The network was hemorrhaging viewers and facing mounting pressure from advertisers. If he didn't do something soon, his career could take a serious hit. The intro music of the Nightly Pulse faded and the screen cut to Brad, who forced a composed expression. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Before we begin tonight, I want to take a moment to address something that has caused quite the reaction over the past few days. He paused, taking a breath. His hands gripped the desk. Last week, I made a joke about Karoline Leavitt's gold cross necklace. My intent, like all my jokes, was to make a point about the blurred lines between religion and government. But I recognized that my words offended a lot of people, and that was never my intention. His voice was carefully measured, trying to walk the fine line between an apology and a defense of his original stance. I believe in freedom of expression. And that includes both my right to criticize public officials and Karoline's right to wear whatever symbolizes her faith. I may not agree with her politics, but I respect her right to express herself, just as I hope others respect my right to challenge ideas. He leaned forward slightly. That being said, if my words came across as an attack on faith itself, let me be clear, that was not my goal. And for those who felt personally targeted, I hear you. The apology, if it could be called that, was immediately dissected by both sides. Liberals praised him for not completely backing down, while conservatives dismissed it as a weak attempt at damage control. Karoline Leavitt, on the other hand, had the final word. She appeared on America's Morning News the next day, where the host asked, "Karoline, Brad Whitman addressed his comments last night. Do you accept his explanation?" Karoline smiled. "Look, I'm not someone who holds grudges. Brad is entitled to his opinions, just like I am. But this situation wasn't just about me, it was about millions of Americans who feel their values are constantly under attack by the media. And if this controversy did anything, it reminded people that faith is not something to be mocked." Her response was elegant, powerful, and unshakable. Within days, the controversy began to fade from the headlines, but its impact lingered. Brad Whitman had learned that mocking faith wasn't as risk-free as he had assumed. His reputation took a hit, and the Nightly Pulse saw a slight decline in ratings. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's standing among conservatives had only grown stronger. She had turned a moment of ridicule into a rallying cry, one that resonated far beyond Washington, D.C. And in the end, it was clear the gold cross necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol. And for millions, it had just become more powerful than ever.